This week, Kelly was just 5 years old when her parents divorced, and she was forced to choose between staying with her mom or living with her dad. So her early life was anything but normal. Later, as a wife and mother, she was determined to keep her family together at almost any cost. And it literally cost her everything. Welcome to My Crazy Divorce.
I'm a failure as a husband. I'm a failure as a man.
It's just, I'm beautiful and I'm bright and I deserve better.
It's a great day, I'm feeling good. Oh, the possibilities of what I could, do with the world at my fingertips. My imagination brings a smile up to my lips. Oh.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of My Crazy Divorce. I'm your host, Tom Milligan. You won't want to miss this week's craziness. As you'll hear in just a minute, Kelly's story starts out pretty rough and just keeps getting worse and worse. It's almost unbelievable the amount of shit she's had to deal with in her life. But first, as always, remember that I'm not an attorney or a therapist, so nothing on this show should ever be mistaken as legal or therapeutic advice. Please seek out the appropriate professional if you need that type of support. Also, I'm always looking for guests for the show. So if your divorce story is a crazy one, I want to hear about it. Please visit mycrazydivorce.com and click on the Apply to be a Guest button. It only takes a minute, and I promise we'll have a great time recording the show. Now, before we get to the interview, I do have a warning to give you. This week's story is tragic. Normally, we try to have a good time, but this one includes substance abuse, death, and some serious criminal activity. So it's not as lighthearted as some of our previous episodes. If you're extra sensitive, you may want to sit this one out. I seriously won't hold it against you. You've been warned. So let's meet Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to hear your story today.
Yeah, I'm excited to tell it.
Where does Kelly come from? Tell us about your childhood.
Well, I'm born and raised in Texas. I grew up in a really small town called Springtown. I lived there maybe until I was about 10 years old, and then we moved to a bigger city, Fort Worth. My
That's a pretty
parents
big
got,
city.
oh, yeah, huge. Yes, so big. My parents got divorced when I was about 5 years old, and I have two other siblings, and they gave us the option to choose, do you want to stay with mom or do you want to stay with dad? So I stayed with my dad. So I was about 10 years old in Springtown. We lived there. Um, and just from there, we came to Fort Worth, like I said, and I've just been here, except for 1 year of my life I spent in Arizona, which we will get to. I've been here all my life.
Okay, so back up for a second. How old were you when they got divorced?
I was about 5 years old.
And they gave you the option at 5 years old?
Yes. Yep, at 5 years old. They said,
Okay,
you can
that's
decide.
a first on this show for sure.
Yeah.
We're literally 1 minute in, and
Already blowing your mind, right? Yeah.
Yes. So hold on for a sec, though. So you chose to go with dad.
I did.
I hear that kind of thing in teenagers, but then again,
Mhm.
I only hear about teenagers being given the option. So what was going on there? Why dad?
I was a daddy's girl. I was head over heels for my dad. I mean, in my eyes, he could do no wrong. My parents were truck drivers growing up, so they weren't home a lot. But I don't know. I felt myself drawn more to my dad than my mom. I don't want to say my mom is mean, but she wasn't always nice to us growing up.
Okay.
So I think that also had a lot to do with it.
That,
Wanting to spend more time with my dad.
that makes sense. And your siblings, who did they choose?
They chose my mom.
So
Yeah.
you chose your dad and to be away from your siblings.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. That is, well, we might have to get, you and I just might have to have a longer conversation about that. But that's not what we're here for. But
Right.
I think that might play a part in what we're going to talk about today, because that's literally, I'm blown away.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're 10 and you moved to Fort Worth. And I
We
apologize
moved
for
to Fort
interrupting.
Worth. Oh, you're fine. Yeah, we moved to Fort Worth, and things are good. My dad, it does what he can as a single father. I guess I Let me back up and say the reason my parents got divorced was because when I was 5 years old, my dad came out as gay, and that obviously was a deal breaker for my mom.
Hmm.
Um, so growing up with my dad in Fort Worth in the 90s, people were not very kind about things like that, back then. So I got bullied a lot, I got picked on a lot, but it never made me want to leave my dad. Like I feel like it just made me, like a stronger person. I know it's cliche to say, but it really did, like having to deal with that and seeing what my dad went through. I feel like I have a lot more compassion towards, especially that community and everything. So
That's actually fascinating. And you said your dad was a truck driver.
he was. Both of my parents, they did it together.
Oh, really? Like over the
Mhm.
road stuff?
Over the road stuff. Yep, they would go for days at a time, and myself and my siblings, when we were younger, we would go stay with my grandparents while they were gone. Sometimes, like maybe in the summertime or when we weren't in school, like when I wasn't old enough to go to school yet, I would go with them. Like I've been everywhere. I've been so many places. Slept in the back of the camper in the truck. Like it was so cool. It was so much fun. I remember that. It was a lot of fun.
That's that's incredible. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the trucker community, but I just have to imagine that your dad took a lot of shit for being a gay trucker.
Well, and I don't know that he was really out about it then. Um, I, I From my understanding, my dad was in Vietnam, and
Mm,
that's when he realized that he was more interested in men than women. But I think when he came back, he had to go by this, I don't know what you call it, like this, what everybody expected him to be, and that's what he was. And I can only imagine how unhappy he was, living
right.
this life he didn't, you know, that he didn't really want, or he didn't feel like he fit into. So,
Yeah. I have a son who's gay, and I'm so grateful that he didn't feel the need to. I mean,
right.
he probably did feel the need. I guess I should say I'm glad he was strong enough to say, screw society, I'm going to
And
be who
this
I
is who
am.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, okay. So then what? So you're living in Fort
So
Worth
I'm
and
living in Fort Worth. My dad works a night job, so there's really not anybody there in the evenings to watch me when I'm not in school. I start getting into a little bit of trouble, staying out too late, skipping school. By this time, I'm in middle school, and I'm already, skipping a couple days a week, going to my friend's house, and so my dad, he finally finds out, and he's like, "Okay, enough. I'm gonna go send you to live with your mom," which I didn't want because I knew my freedom was done, like it was over.
hmm
But then I went to go live with my mom and then my siblings, and um, it was it was okay. I don't. I have a good relationship with my mother. It could be better. Um, she has a better relationship with my siblings than I think she does with me, and it's very obvious. She makes it pretty obvious. So I think that you know, when I went to live with my mom, I gave her a hard time. I didn't try to not get into trouble, or, I was just a lot of pushback and stuff like that. But I don't know if that's because I just lost my freedom or because I didn't like how she favored my brother and my sister. But yeah, I was a pretty troubled teen.
so you lived with your dad for 8 years or so, 7 years before you moved to your
Until I was
mom's.
about 12 or 13, yeah. And then I went to go live with my mom once I started middle school. And then I stayed with her all through high school. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Uh, How's your relationship with her now?
Now it's better. She actually lives about 5 minutes down the road.
Nice.
But I don't ever see her. Yeah. But it has gotten better. And I think it's just gotten better since some of the things that have happened have happened. It has brought us closer.
Okay.
Um, so But yeah.
And how about your dad though? Are you still tight with
Oh,
dad?
oh yes, very much so. I talk to my dad very often. He lives about 2 hours away. I don't see him as often as I'd like, but I do talk to him on a regular basis. Yeah.
And um what about your siblings?
I'm really close with my sister. I talk to her often as well. My brother, not so much. I'll tell you why later.
Okay.
But yeah,
Part of the
I'm
story we're going to get to.
yes, it's part of the story. Yeah, but we're
Okay.
not. We actually don't speak at all. So
Oh, I
yeah,
hate hearing stuff like
it's
that.
unfortunate. It really is.
I think it's what I've learned though throughout this podcast is it's shockingly common.
Hmm.
And you know, there were times in my family I didn't talk to a couple of my siblings. So it's not that um, not judging. I'm just surprised. I always figured I was the only one.
No.
Um,
Yeah, no, you're not.
yeah, I'm learning. Okay, so all right. So you're living with your mom. How about high school? Did you kind of pull things together, or did you just remain a hellion?
I high school was rough. I actually dropped out when I was 16 for about 4 or 5 months. And then I don't know, just something snaps and it's like, what the hell am I doing? I'm
Right.
basically throwing my life away. And so I went back. I finished a year behind, but I did graduate. I do have a high school diploma. So that was a big accomplishment for me.
Yeah, that's great. That it is. Sorry, adjusting lighting. Um, it's like way too bright then way too dark. So, um, so you graduated a year late, but you graduated,
But I
not a
did graduate.
GED.
No. Yeah, I got
Um,
a high school diploma and everything. Yeah.
I dated a girl in high school. We were seniors, and she was 19, uh, and she had been in some massive accident when she was a kid, and so she was, or maybe it was, I don't even remember. She was just held back, and
Hmm.
and she missed some time, and so she was the oldest kid in school, and I thought she looked great. So um, there you go. Uh, Kim, if you're listening, you look great. Um, okay. Um, oh, so you graduated high school, then what? Just working, or did you end up in college?
No, I didn't go to college. I did start working when I was 16, like the week after I turned 16. I already had a job lined up as a waitress. I was ready to go. Like, anything to get out of my mom, not to get out of her house, but to spend as much time away from home and to make money and to have things for myself. So I was ready to work, and I worked. I worked a lot. I almost full time working in high school and then going to school as well. So yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Oh yeah.
I think that I know there's a lot of push people have to, you know, I only want you to be a student. I don't want you to work. And then
Hmm.
they graduate from college when they're 25, 26 years old with a master's and they've never had a paycheck. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said for a balance there. So good for you, in
Yeah.
my opinion. I know a bunch of parents will give me a bunch of crap about that, but okay.
I give my son is 16 and he's working now, and I tell him you can work one day during the week and on the weekends only because school comes first. But my son is a straight A student, so I don't want anything to deter that. He's so smart, so I tell him
Yeah.
school first and then work.
You know, it's funny because, you know, you and I have now been talking for 15 minutes or so total. And I'm looking at you, and you just said you have a 16-year-old son. And I knew that, but you don't look much older than that yourself. So that just didn't register for a second.
Yeah, almost 4. I'll be 40 this year, so
Really?
yep. Yeah.
Holy crap. Well done. Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's shift gears and let's start talking about maybe the villain of the story. I don't know the whole story, but we're going to find out here in just a minute.
Yes.
How about this? We're going to call him the antagonist of the story, at least, and we're going to call him Dave.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did Dave grow up? And oh, wait, before we get to Dave, I'm sorry. I always have to do this because sometimes I forget. Was religion part of your life at all as a kid?
Um, kind of when my parents would be away and we would have to spend time at my grandparents, they would force us to go to church and all that. But outside of that, I really didn't, go to church, or I was not really involved in it very much. Even as an adult, um, now I don't. It's not really a thing for me. No,
Yeah. By the way, the grandparents you're talking about, are these your mom's parents or your dad's?
they're my dad's parents.
So they were religious.
They were very religious. Yes.
Now I've got to ask this. How did they take it when your dad came out?
Oh, I think for a while that they were not very accepting of it. I think it took them a few years to come around and finally speak to him again and accept him for who he was. Yeah.
That's heartbreaking. But
Hmm.
are they on board? Or I don't know if they're still alive, but
They're
are they
not.
on
Yeah,
board?
they're actually not. They they're both deceased, but I don't think that they were really ever fully accepting of it. We would have family functions and things like that our family would not be invited to. We wouldn't be included in like Christmases and things like that. So that's what tells me that them, along with maybe some other family members, they weren't very accepting of you know who he was. So yeah,
That just sucks. I'm
it
sorry.
does. And then it
I'm
does.
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. That sucks. Anyone out there listening, don't do that. Um, that's just dumb.
it
It's just
is.
flat out dumb.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm bagging on your grandparents, but
Oh, you're
that's just
fine.
dumb. That is dumb.
Yeah. I mean, us as children, we didn't have anything to do with that, So that just made us feel like, maybe it was us or something, when in reality it didn't have anything to do with us at all. So,
Yeah. Well, and the fact is, it has everything to do with them.
yes,
I
most
mean,
definitely.
that's
Yep.
that's the bottom line. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's get to Dave. Um,
Okay.
where was Dave born? Let's same sets of questions. Where's he from?
He's actually from Fort Worth. He has lived in Texas as well all his life, except for 1 year. But yeah, he grew up in Fort Worth. He his dad was an alcoholic and he was abusive. So his mom and dad split pretty early on, and then it was just his mom on her own. Um, he has, let's see, three siblings. He has three sisters. He's the only boy, so
Hmm.
of course she babied him like like you wouldn't believe, like I baby my son.
Hmm.
um, but yeah, he, also not religious. Didn't I I can't even tell you the last time he had stepped foot in a church with me. So who knows, you
Right.
know. But yeah, we didn't grow up very far apart from each other. So
And was he, a good student? Was he? I mean, did he
oh,
kind of have the same thing?
he's so smart. He graduated when he was 16. He graduated 2 years early. Yep.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So you
Yeah.
graduated a year late. He graduated 2 years early.
2 years early.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was definitely impressed. It was one of the things that I was attracted to. That he was so smart. You
Yeah.
know. So.
And he did he then, I mean, you're 16 years old, you graduate from high school. Is he Doogie Howser? Did he go right on to high school or to college,
uh,
excuse me?
so he took a couple years of community college, but I think that he felt that was not for him.
Yeah.
So, but he was working since he was 15. Even when he was in high school, he was working. So he just worked, went to school a couple of years, and then decided it wasn't for him, and then he just worked from there on out. So,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
All right. So that's, I think we have a kind of a picture of family life for both of you guys, but at some point these kids from Fort Worth meet up.
Yes.
How
So
did you guys meet?
we have a mutual friend,
Mm.
and I worked with her, and one day she said, "Hey, I'm going to go to this guy's house. He's having a little house party. Do you want to go? I think that you guys would, get along really well." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, fine." So we go, and sure enough, we hit it off like immediately. Um, and so that's how we met.
And when
And
was that?
that was, oh gosh, probably 97, maybe 1997
Wow.
was, yeah. I was still in school. I was still in high school. I was 17 and he was 16, I think, if I
Oh,
remember
so he's
correctly.
younger. So he
He's a
just
year younger
graduated
than
then?
me. Hmm. Yeah.
So he had just graduated. You're like a sophomore or junior at that point.
Hmm.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys hit it off. You're kind of a kind of a bizarre high school romance.
Yeah. Yeah. We were like high school sweethearts, but not in the same high school, but, you know, yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
great. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, he lived on his own with his sister. Well, not on his own, but he lived with, it was just him and his sister, and they lived
Huh.
together. And I think that that was one thing that also attracted me to him, was because he had all this freedom. There was
Right.
no parentals around to tell him, you can't do this, or you have to be home at this time. So, I was like, oh, this is fun. Nobody to tell me what to do or what time to be home. Like, hell yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, yeah. At 16, isn't that what
Yep.
everybody wants?
Oh yeah. You want freedom.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you get that freedom, you realize that all you do is work.
Yes, you work, pay bills, sleep, work, pay bills, sleep. Yes. Yep.
And every once in a while, cook a meal.
Yeah.
That, that's about it. That's being a grown up until you die.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
Divorce doesn't have to be complicated. Our Divorce.com's 3-step procedure provides a simple and affordable process that you can follow at your own pace. Save thousands by visiting ourdivorce.com today.
Well, okay. So you guys, you hit it off.
Hmm.
Was it I mean, clearly it was pretty much love at first sight, or at least pretty soon. Were you exclusively dating right away?
Yeah, pretty much. Like after we met, we started hanging out more, and then I would start to spend more nights at his house. And because at that time I had a car, so I could bring myself to and from, and he was living only about 15 minutes away from where I lived with my mom. So if I needed to get myself up for school, it wasn't an issue. Like I could do that. Um, so,
So let me ask you this. Everybody who listens to the show knows I grew up Mormon and really uber religious
mhm,
family. Not me
right.
necessarily, but my family. Uh, the idea of a 17-year-old girl having a car and spending the night at her boyfriend's house without their mom showing up with a shotgun, it's really foreign to me. So tell me how that worked. Your mom was just, all right, you're over at Dave's house.
Pretty much. I mean, I think at that point, though, she figured she couldn't control me. I mean, I was like going out on the weekends and drinking at 17 and partying, and I think she knew, and maybe she figured that, there was nothing she could do to stop it. I was going to find a way around it. So
Right.
to just let it happen. So,
And did she like Dave?
At first, she did not. I don't think that she really cared much for him. One, because I was spending a lot of time there, partying. I mean, she had to have known what we were doing,
Right.
you know. So
I
I
think we
think
all
that,
do.
yes. Yeah. So I think just for that mainly is why she was not, as accepting of him in the beginning. But she warmed up to him eventually.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a high school student
Uh-huh.
spending all sorts of time away from home at work, over at your boyfriend's house. He's at community college at this point.
Yeah.
At some point, did you guys move in together?
Yeah, I just kind of went there, and the more I went, the more things from my house went to his house, and eventually I was just there. I just kind of
How
moved
long
my
do you think
way
that
in.
took? So it wasn't like a, do you want to move in with me? It was, oh shit, more than 50% of my stuff is here. So apparently I live here and I
I
visit my
live
mom's.
here. Yes. Yeah, it was pretty much like that. Yeah. And it wasn't immediately after, a few months maybe. We spent, a good amount of time together, and then after that, then that's when I just kind of slid my way in there.
What is it now? You slide into someone's DMs, but you slid right into his house.
Slid right into his house. Yep.
But his sister was there.
His sister was there, and she was older. At the time, I think she was maybe about 20 years old. She lived there with her boyfriend, and then, of course, my ex-husband. So,
Yeah.
and she didn't care what we did because she was doing her own thing as well. So, she, there was nobody supervising us.
Yeah. By the way, I loved how you just said she was older. Wouldn't it be great to think of someone as a 20-year-old being older?
Yeah. That makes me ancient.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about it. Okay. So let's think. I'm trying to figure out what we should ask here, where we should go with this, because this is quite a build-up here, Kellie. This is.
It gets better.
Oh, I know, but.
And I'm
gonna.
Before I came, I was talking to my boyfriend, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna ugly cry. I'm not gonna ugly cry, but I already feel it's coming.
Well, and by the way, if you do ugly cry, I do leave some tears in, but the purpose of this is never to embarrass someone. So.
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
And we can stop if you need to. So.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to jump in now. We'll start talking about engagement story.
Okay. So.
All right, so Kellie, you're living with Dave and his sister. Mm-hmm. At some point, you guys get married or decide to get married. How'd that happen?
So it happened because I got pregnant, which is why we decided to get married, mostly for like the benefits and things like that. The job I was working didn't really offer a lot. So, there was no like big, huge, proposal or anything like that. It was like, oh shit, I'm pregnant. Oh, well, should we get married? It's like, you wanna, or do you wanna? Like, okay. I mean, that was like pretty much it.
There you go. How romantic. Now, where was he working, or what kind of work did he do?
He actually worked for Blockbuster when they used to be around.
Now we're really old.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Be kind, rewind.
Yep.
Okay, so he's at Blockbuster, and they had benefits apparently.
Yeah, they had he was a manager, so he had really good benefits. Yeah.
Got it.
So.
All right, so you guys, I joke around and sometimes say the doctor told you were in love and it was time to get married, and so you said, all right, get married. Did you just go to Justice of the Peace, or was there like a ceremony or something?
No, we actually had a ceremony. We got married in 2005. I was 4 months pregnant when we got married. It was a very small ceremony. It wasn't even in a church. It was like in this little chapel that this lady had. I think she lived out of it, but the other part was, a chapel, and it was really nice. For the circumstance, I was happy with it. So we did that.
And so what was just out of curiosity, what's the wedding date?
November 5th.
November 5th, 2005.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm writing that down. I always like to get a timeline of these things. I don't know if everybody else does this, but whenever somebody gives you a date in these stories, I think, okay, what was I doing right then? And where was I in my marriage right then? And was I happy? Were my kids born? So I just try to put myself and figure out what was happening in my life. And again, I don't know if anyone else does that, but I like to. So,
right.
Okay. So 2005, you're married. And was it happy? Did you live with his sister still, or what?
No, she actually moved out. She and her boyfriend had a kid, their first kid. And so they went to do their own thing as a family and left us in this house. It was actually his childhood home that he lived in, or that we lived in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we did that.
That's interesting. Did his mom just take off and say, here's the house, or how did he end up with the family house?
I'm not really sure. I want to say that his mom had started dating somebody else, and maybe she went off to be with him, live with him maybe. I'm not too sure though, but somehow he and his sister ended up with the house that they grew up in. So
Okay.
that's where we lived for a few years after my son was born.
So that's in Fort Worth. And your son's born, June, July,
He was
August
born
or
in
so.
February of 2006, actually,
February. Oh, because you were 4 months pregnant. Right.
because I was, yeah.
I'm doing the math wrong. Okay. So he's born. You guys are married. Again, were you guys all right? Or was it
Oh,
this, you
yeah.
were young people and so you fought a lot or what?
It was good. It was mostly good. There were a few things that I would see, maybe some habits that he had. Like I told you before, his dad was an alcoholic, and my ex-husband liked to drink. Um, so for me, when I first met him, it was fun for me. Like I was about it. I was, okay with partying every weekend and stuff like that. But when I got pregnant, I thought, in my mind, things are going to change immediately. We're bringing a child into the world. We're going to start a family. Things are going to settle down. But they didn't. He would continue to drink. And that's, once it started getting, progressively worse, that's when, I was like, okay, hold on a second, you know.
And
So,
did you have talks about that?
oh yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, it doesn't have to be every night. It doesn't have to be every weekend. It doesn't, you know, but it didn't really change. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So marriage is cruising along. You have
Hmm.
your regular problems. You've also got some alcohol problems. And that's
Hmm.
not just about behavior. I assume that's not also an expensive hobby.
It is, yeah.
Did that was money an issue at some point?
Not really, because the house that we lived in was paid for. So we didn't have a mortgage or a rent. All we had to do was just pay, the utilities and whatever other costs of living that we had.
Wow.
So
Can I move
we
in?
were, yeah, it was pretty nice to be, 22, 23 and not have to worry about, a lot of money issues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that takes a lot of pressure off.
it really does. Yeah.
Well, so at some point, okay, so your son's born. Let's pick up the
Mhm.
story there. So you have a son in
Yes.
2006.
Yes.
What happens next?
Nothing really happens. I mean, we're a family now, and things are good. Like I said, more good than bad. We take a family vacation every year. We go to the beach. We take weekend trips to San Antonio or, to downtown just to do things. Like we were capable of doing that, financially. So that part, it was a lot of fun, in that aspect. It was really good. So, and then we just did that for a few years until we decided that we didn't want to live in this house anymore. We wanted to go to a nicer neighborhood, um, and we could afford it. And so we did. So eventually, I think my son was maybe 3 years old when we left that house, and we moved into a nicer place, a nicer neighborhood. Um,
So that must have been a really bad neighborhood to go from zero housing costs to
to
greater
having
than
them
zero.
in Yeah, I mean it for me it wasn't somewhere that I wanted my son to grow up. I didn't want him going to school in I don't want to call it a bad neighborhood, but just I grew up going to good schools. I wanted to make sure my son had that same good education. So we decided, this is not the place for us as a family. And then especially if we wanted to expand our family, I would, it wasn't there that I wanted that.
Sure.
So,
No, that makes sense. Everybody wants to,
yeah.
you want your kids to have the best. So
Right. Yep.
remind me real quick, going back in time, you guys got married in 2005. When did you meet?
We met probably 97, 98. We went back and forth for a few years. We dated for a while and then we'd break up for 2 or 3 months. And then we'd always find our way back to each other. And we did that for a few years.
Okay. So when your daughter's born, you guys have been together at least off and on for a decade.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
It
And
really is. And to be so young, it's
yeah.
like, yeah.
Okay. All right. So life's going on. Let's at some point something has to go to shit or you wouldn't be sitting
Yes.
there. So
So,
we've got the good part. At some point we have to start going over the hill.
ascending, descending. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so really for me, it was just the drinking was the main issue. I worked a night job and he worked a day job. So we wouldn't have
Mm.
to put our kids in any type of childcare, daycare, no babysitters, nothing like that. I would come home from my night job at 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I would come home to, my door being unlocked, all my windows open, all the lights on, the garage is still open. I would walk inside and he'd be there passed out. Like this was a very
Oh.
common occurrence. Yeah. And then he would have also my two kids there as well.
This is always a weird thing for me to ask, but hey, we're here on a podcast, right? So people that are married sometimes have sex. How was the
Uh-huh.
intimacy in this relationship?
Most of the time, it was no, thank you. I didn't even want to be touched by him. I didn't like who he was as a person, and I just couldn't get past that. And
Yeah.
so when he would touch me, I would feel disgusted.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So that
Hmm.
didn't help, I'm sure, in the relationship.
Oh no, no, yeah, because then it was a argument about why can't I touch you? Why can't we be intimate? Why don't you, you know, why don't you want me in that way? But
Yeah.
it all goes back to him. So
Yeah. Well, and of course, um, some people get a little bit amorous when they're drinking too. So,
yes, yeah, and that
he's
was pretty
drunk and
annoying as
he's
well. Yeah, yeah.
all right. So based on that, I assume then that, again, if someone's drinking all the time, there's no sex in the marriage, you don't like the person and he's treating, or at least he's putting your children in danger. There's no way this is going to last very long. So when did it all,
I mean,
let's get to that part.
okay. So, um, let's see, 2014. It was actually New Year's Eve. We went out for New Year's Eve, had a good time, drinking, whatever. I end up getting pregnant that on New Year's Eve. So the yeah. So then comes our son, Samuel. But before then, before my son was born, okay. So he's still drinking. And nothing has really changed. But I'm pregnant now. With our third child, and I'm not
Hmm.
going anywhere. Like I feel like I'm stuck, pretty much. So I'm at the grocery store with my two children, and I'm probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months pregnant, and I'm going to check out, and I try to use one of the credit cards that we have, and it declines. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there's no way, like there's money there, but I don't understand what's wrong. So I call him and I'm like, hey, the credit card's not going through. Like, what's up? And he's like super like calm about it. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, well, it kind of is, because I'm here in line with the basket full of groceries. And, they're telling me that I can't, this card's not working and it's embarrassing and I need to know what's going on. He's like, I don't worry about it. I'll take care of it when I get home. So, me being me, I go home and I look into it and I log into our credit card statement and I see all these charges for like random places. And it's not even places that I know of, like just weird names. And so I start to Google the names of these places that the charges are showing from, and it's all online gambling. So he actually racked up on our credit card $5,000 worth of debt in online gambling. Yeah. And that's how
Wow.
I found out, because I could not pay for my groceries. Yeah. And I don't really even know how long it had been going on. When I confronted him about it, he confessed and he said, okay, yes, I have this problem. And I just can't, I don't know how to stop. He said, I'll gamble, I'll lose the money, and then I'll go and I'll try to pay some off. So, it's not noticeable. Um, and I don't know how long he did that for, but that's one of the issues that was it was a huge deal. It was a huge deal for me. So after that, I told him, look, you need to get your shit together. We're about to bring another kid into the mix. We cannot afford for you to go gamble our savings away. Like, get it together. And I tell him, I don't even remember how the conversation went, but we basically started talking about making a change. He said, well, what if we moved away? I'm like, okay, well then let's go. I'm all for it. I hate living in Texas. So anywhere, for me, anywhere is better than where I'm at right now. So he says, well, my job can transfer us to, wherever, there's another spot available. So Arizona comes up. And I'm like, yes, let's go. Let's start fresh. Let's start over. Let's, get away from family and, everything toxic here. And let's go, let's just see what we can do in Arizona. So, as soon as my son was born in 2016, I'm sorry, in 2015, my son was born in September. October, we were already in Arizona.
Which part of Arizona?
We lived in Buckeye. So very, very small dairy farm town. Lots of cows. It smelled really bad, like cow shit, and there were flies everywhere. But it was so beautiful. It was so nice.
It sounds like it. It's you really sold me. And
um,
where is Buckeye? Is it
it
near Phoenix or anything? Or
yes.
okay, so Phoenix, it's
Yeah, it's probably about 30 minutes outside of Phoenix.
okay.
Yeah,
And since Phoenix takes
close to
like 4
Phoenix.
hours to get across, um,
To
it's
get
such a big
yes,
place.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
wow.
huge. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Phoenix is one
So
of those cities that you never even know where it stops because it's just bleeds into
right.
everything around it, and it's a crazy place. It's a
Yeah.
cool town, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
Oh yeah.
you've got
So much
this,
stuff to do there.
yeah. So you're in Arizona now. You've said a couple of different times that you both lived in Texas your whole life except for 1 year. I'm assuming this is the year.
Except for
You're in Arizona. He's still working for Blockbuster.
by this time, he works for a big furniture company. Um, he's running one of their locations. So they say, we have these openings in all these different states and cities. If you want to go, go. And so they moved us there and everything. They sent him about 6 weeks ahead of me so he could find us a place to live, so he could get acclimated and get comfortable with the place that he was going to be working at. Get to know his team and stuff like that. So he was there almost 2 months before we were looking for a house and
Wow.
stuff. And he did find a house. He found a really nice 2-bedroom house. Yeah, it was really nice. You could see mountains from every window. I mean, we were surrounded by them. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. So other than the flies
Yeah.
and the smell, it was a great place.
Yep. Oh yeah. I loved it.
So you only stayed a year though. What happened?
This is the hard part of the story. Um, we lived there for a whole year. Well, we okay. So we moved there after my son was born. He was maybe a month old when we moved there. Everything was great. Like we were still doing like the whole family thing, going out camping and taking trips and things like that. But the drinking never stopped. It continued, and I think if anything, it got heavier. Um, so I never really had to work a full time job until we got to Arizona because, things, it was a new place. So we were doing a lot of different things and going to see things, and money was not, it wasn't what we wanted it to be. And so he said, maybe you should get a job, and start helping a little bit. So, which I didn't have a problem with. Like, I had no problem working and contributing and things like that. So I had gotten this job, and I remember I was only there for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, um, working at this job. But I remember we were planning a camping trip. one weekend, and I had asked my boss, "Hey, can I have this day?" And he was like, "Sorry, I really need you here. Like you need to work." And it's like, "Okay, fine, whatever." So that day that I could have been off, we were getting ready for he was getting ready for our camping trip at home. I went to work. Um, Really good day at work. I'll never forget it. My boss had told me, "Hey, we're noticing, how well you're working, your performance. It's really good. Like, and at a later date, let's talk about maybe a promotion." I'm like, "Oh shit, that's badass. Like, I just started, I'm doing so well for myself. Like, I was really excited." So I drove home. It was probably about 11 o'clock at night when I got off. Drove home just in a really good mood, ready, excited to tell my ex-husband, about the news and everything. And I pull onto my street, and there are cop cars, ambulance, fire department, everything.
What?
And at first, I don't think, I'm just like, oh shit, something happened in the neighborhood. So I'm driving down the street, and I see my house is taped off with police tape. So
Oh,
immediately I
no.
just throw my car in park, in the middle of the street, get out, and there's two people walking towards me who were actually detectives. And they asked me, "Are you so and so?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We're sorry to tell you that there's been an accident in your home, and your son, Samuel, didn't make it. He passed away."
No.
And I was so confused. I didn't know. I, I thought, my first thought was something happened to my husband. He actually, he has high blood pressure and, just a lot of other health issues that we had a really hard time controlling. And so I thought, oh shit, like maybe he collapsed, or maybe, something happened with him, but it wasn't him. It was my son. So what happened was my ex-husband put my son to take a bath, and then he walked away from the bathtub, and he sat down somewhere, and he ended up falling asleep, and my son drowned. So
Kellie, I don't even know what to say.
yeah.
Your son was what, 4 months old at this point? 8 months old, something like that?
He had just turned a year old.
Oh,
He
gosh.
had just celebrated his birthday in September, and he passed in October. So,
Oh,
and
my
when
gosh.
it happened, I didn't, they didn't tell me exactly what had happened. They just said there was an accident, that he didn't make it. Um, and I know, like, on TV and stuff like that, people, they're very dramatic about it. They fall to their knees and they're like screaming, and, you know, and that wasn't it at all. Like, I feel like I had an out of body experience. Like, it was, it was unreal. I was so confused. I couldn't grasp the concept of what they were telling me. Like, it didn't make sense, and they, like, I don't know. And I didn't even think to ask at that time, like, how it happened. I was just more concerned for my son and then my other two children. Like, as soon as they told me about that, I was like, well, where are my other kids? And they were there. My other two kids actually had witnessed it. So what happened after he left him in the bathtub, after he fell asleep and everything, the water was filling up, and our bathroom was above the kitchen downstairs. So the water was coming from the ceiling, and my two younger children were in the living room, and they could see and hear the water. So they went upstairs to tell dad, "Hey, what's going on? Our bathroom is flooded, and there in the bathtub is their baby brother." And they have to wake up their dad, and it just, from there, it, yeah, was,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
I again, words can't express. That there's nothing
yeah,
that can. I've had a couple of scares with my kids, and the sinking, horrible, empty, horrible feeling of just being scared is enough. I can't
hmm
even
yeah,
imagine. I just can't. Let's just say this: there's been a lot of sorrow on this show. Nothing compares to what you just shared. Nothing, and nothing could. I
yeah.
nothing could. So, whatever divorce story comes next, which we're obviously going to hear, is doesn't compare. But let's pick up the story.
Okay. Um, After that happened, there was a lot of interviews with police. They wanted to know, were there any issues within the marriage? They thought, well, what if, maybe he could have done it on purpose? Was he mad at me about something? But I never ever thought that it was on purpose. Um, my ex-husband loves his kids. He adores them. He was an amazing father. Aside from the gambling and the drinking and, leaving them unsupervised basically for hours. Like when he was sober and himself, he was the best dad that anybody could ask for. Um, he just let the drinking get in the way. So after my after the accident, they pried a lot.
Hmm.
CPS had to get involved because we had other kids in the home. We couldn't be with our other two children unsupervised. My sister actually had to stay with us just to have another adult
Wow.
present. Yeah, it was really hard. My ex husband spent several days in the hospital because his blood pressure went through the roof. They didn't understand how he didn't have a stroke, you know. Yeah, so they let him out of the hospital, and then we proceed to start with funeral arrangements and things like that. And us not being from Arizona, I did not want my son to be laid to rest there, so I insisted that he be buried here in Texas, closer to families. you know I and then I think in the back of my mind, I knew at that point I was going to come back to Texas. Like, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to stay in that house where my son had passed away.
Yeah.
um, So we once, the police and the medical examiners, declared it an accident, an accidental drowning. Then that's when we could get him ready for to be brought to Texas to be buried. So my mom actually works for an airline, and they were nice enough to fly all of us for free, including my son, so we could bring him here to Texas for the service. So that was really nice, because
Yeah.
otherwise we wouldn't have been able to afford it. Four people, and then and having to, I don't know what it costs to transport a body, but I can imagine it's not very cheap. So, that was a blessing for us, to be able to bring my son here and not have to worry about the cost of it. So we had the funeral here in Texas. He's in a cemetery maybe 20 minutes away, so I can see him as often as I'd like. And, um, you know, but after we buried him, we did go back to Arizona because we did have the house there. We were in a lease with them and everything. And my kids were still in school at the time as well. And so, it's like we couldn't just stay in Texas forever. We had to go back. But
Hmm.
I couldn't be in that house, where my son passed away. So I told him, okay, well, we need to come back to Texas. I need to be closer to my son, like separation anxiety, big time, you know.
Hmm.
But after that happened, my husband, of course, he's completely beside himself. He's completely checked out, drinking every day, all day, abusing his prescription medications. There was one point where he left and he was gone for hours. And I'm like, where did you go? And he didn't want to tell me. So I waited for him to fall asleep. And then I put his phone on his thumb so I could unlock it and I could
Mm-hmm.
see, what is he doing? Where is he going? I felt like at that time that was my right. This is my, at the time, my husband. And we're going through this thing together. I need to know what you're up to. So it turns out that somebody that he worked with was giving him other pills and things like that, and they thought they were helping. And so
Oh.
I got that person's phone number and I texted them and I'm like, look, I know you know what we're going through. Can you please knock? Because it's not okay. It's not helping anything. It's only making it worse. But along with finding out that, I also found out some other things that I didn't know. When he had been sent to Arizona to look for a house for us, they actually put him in a hotel. And going through text messages and emails and things like that, I found a lot of correspondence from women. He was actually trying to, meet up with women while he was there and get them to come to his hotel room and things. And I don't know how far it went, but just to see that he was reaching out and trying was enough. Like, that was enough. I also found that one of the, oh yeah, there's more. One of the people that he worked with, he was having an emotional affair with. They would talk constantly back and forth, and that I didn't know about either, and I also found that out. So I confronted him about everything, and he's just like, "Okay, I'll stop." Like, it wasn't anything. Of course, it's never anything. It's always just we're just talking, or she's just a friend. I got that whole deal.
Yep.
And I told him, "Okay, now we're going back to Texas. Like, we're leaving all of this. I can't be in this house. I can't be. It's not good for you to be around these people that are obviously not helping the situation." So we moved back to Texas. We stay with my mom in the beginning because we didn't have anywhere to live. So we went to live with my mom, and shit just got progressively worse. From there, it got worse.
So let's kind of recap here for a minute, because there's a lot of shit going on here in this story.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you have 3 children.
Yes.
You're in Arizona. I mean, you're in Arizona. You have 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
This horrible accident happens. And unlike some accidents, entirely preventable.
Yes.
And that just, in my mind, that just for some reason, that's 10 times worse. I mean, completely preventable. And then he increases his drinking. He's
Yes.
abusing his own prescriptions and then adding other drugs on top of that aren't prescribed.
Yes.
He's having an emotional affair at the time, and you also discover that he tried to have, and maybe did have, physical affairs prior
With
to all of this.
others. Mm-hmm.
Did I miss anything?
No.
Holy
That's
crap.
it. Yeah.
He's a
And
gem.
oh yeah. Yeah. And it
So
for,
let me ask you this though first, Kellie. Was there blame? Were you angry at him? I mean, it sounds like you just didn't even think about leaving him at that point.
in the beginning I was not angry. I just it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in my mind, it could have happened to me. It could happen to anyone. Um, so no, I did not blame him, and I don't think I blame him now. It's just all of the other things that were thrown into the mix is what really, did it for us.
Okay. Wow. I've never been in the situation, so I can never say this is how I would respond. No one can until they're in that
Right.
situation. Heaven
Right.
forbid. But wow, I kudos to you for being a bigger person than I think I would be.
Yeah, I mean, my
So
thing was I wanted to keep my family together. I didn't, and especially at that time, when we need each other the most, I wanted to make sure that we were all together and all, you know, helping each other and getting through it together as a family as we should have. And that's not what happened at all, actually.
yeah, wow,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, so you go back to Texas.
So we go back to Texas. Things are not any better. He eventually goes back to work, but he's still drinking, still abusing medications. Who knows what else? I don't really know. But one day, it was probably a week before Christmas, he comes home and he's drunk and he tells me, I fucked up. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I was involved in a hit and run. Somebody hit my car and they took off. And I said, well, did you stop and call the police? And he was like, well, no, I just came straight home. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, that's weird, but okay.
And how
So
did
then
he
maybe
fuck up if
10,
they hit him?
well, because he wrecked the car. He came home with a
Oh, okay.
totaled car, basically. Yeah. So he's like, well, shit, there goes our car. So maybe 10 minutes later, a guy comes knocking at my mom's door. And he's like, somebody just hit my car. And it's that car that's parked outside is the one that hit my car. So his car was parked in the street. So he was driving home and he sideswiped somebody. And then he just, I didn't even stop. He just drove straight home. Like, you're not going to get caught. I mean,
So
you
Dave,
know,
your ex is the one who caused the accident.
he's
He didn't
actually
get
the
hit.
one
He
that,
did the hitting.
yes. Yep.
Wow. That's kind of important part of the story, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah. Yeah. So the guy calls the police. They come. They arrest him for a DUI. And this is right before Christmas. My kids are there, seeing everything. So that was the first DUI.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
The first DUI.
we're gonna have a few of those, I take it.
The first DUI and the first wrecked car.
Ugh.
Yeah. So, yeah, so he goes to jail for that. He gets out. Um, he's still working. I think that he has to do like I don't know if it's community service or weekend jail. I don't remember which time it was for this one. Uh,
No.
yeah, yeah. Um, but but yeah, nothing changes. It's still the same. It's still work, drink, drugs, home, and that went on for a little bit. It got to a point to where he was drinking at work, and that's actually how he ended up losing his job. He called the cops on himself at work one day. He said, I'm drunk. I think he might have had a warrant or something, and he's like, I have a warrant. Come get me. So the police came, and they were like, like, well, what are you doing? We're not, like, and the thing about my husband is anytime he would get into any kind of trouble, he would always just refer back to, well, my son just passed away. So there's my excuse for what I'm doing, for my behavior.
Oh.
It was always, well, here's my situation. Here's what I'm going through. Even, 4 or 5 months down the road, he was still, well, it's because my son passed away. Like at some point he needed to take responsibility for what he was doing, and he couldn't. It was always, it's because my son passed away.
Yeah, that's
So he,
not cool.
yeah, no. So he ends up getting 2 more DUIs. He wrecks a total of 3 cars. He loses his job because they know that he's drinking at work, because he calls the cops on himself. He like gives himself away. you know? Yeah, it's just like the world's dumbest criminals. I mean, you know,
That's right.
like one of those things. It's like, who does that? Yeah.
So are you working at
Yeah.
this point?
Another thing that happened. I am working. I have a little part-time job at a museum just to have some income coming in. Um, it's also at that time hard for me to really do a whole lot because I'm missing my son, you know,
Yeah.
and I can't, you know, like it's hard for me to function. It's hard for me to go out and be around people without them seeing that something is wrong and then asking or them knowing and you know. But I did. I worked for a little bit. This little part-time job. It was for me. It was good. It was a chance for me to just have 4 or 5 hours a day away from all the drama. You
Yeah. It's
know.
a distraction, if nothing else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's exactly what it was. Until I couldn't. I felt like I had to constantly babysit him. And I worried about leaving him alone with my children. I worried, you know, about him drinking and driving with them. Anything could have happened. You know, it, the way I saw it, that he was in no hurry to go through this healing process with us. He just wanted to continue to drink his problems away and forget about them. And so that's what he did. He did that for a while, several months.
Wow. Again, it's just,
Yeah.
it's the whole story is heartbreaking. Um, but my brother said a long time ago that every single thing that happens to us in life, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, changes us.
Hmm.
And we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we get to choose if we're a better person or a worse person for having gone through it.
Right.
And it sounds like he just decided that this was my excuse, and there's a fork in the road here. I'm taking the fork that makes my life shittier.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. And
that's
then
awful.
he, yeah. So another thing that happened, um, when we had moved back to Texas from Arizona, at the time I didn't know I was pregnant again. But I'm just guessing from all the stress and everything, I ended up having a miscarriage, and I'll never forget it. It was the Friday before Valentine's Day, and I went to see my doctor, and she said, "Oh, your fluid levels look a little low. I'm going to have you go see the specialist. Like, call them as soon as you leave and go see them." So I did, but they couldn't get me in to see them. And so Monday was Valentine's Day, and my doctor called me and she said, "Did you see them?" I said, "No, they didn't have time or whatever, but they're going to call me when I can go." And she said, "No, come into my office right now." So I went in. They couldn't find a heartbeat. Turns out
Mm.
that, I had miscarried the baby. And that appointment on Valentine's Day, I wanted my ex husband to go with me, and he wouldn't go. So I was by myself when they told me that my baby didn't have a heartbeat. So that was another thing that, you know, did it for me was that.
And what year was that?
This was in 2017 by the time we were back in Texas. Well, 2018 because it was like the new year, but yeah.
Okay. So Valentine's Day 2018, give or take a day. Another really horrible day, and Dave didn't contribute. I mean, he contributed, but not in a good way.
Right.
And all right. So you've got, again, you have the patience of Job.
Uh,
Because you've got, I mean, we already went through the list of shit, and it just keeps
uh-huh,
piling up. And yet
uh-huh,
you're still married.
uh-huh.
Um, I'm going to assume that there's been some fairly heated arguments along the way, that you've told him you're leaving him a couple of times. I'm
Oh yeah.
assuming that this is not a smooth sail for you guys.
No, no, it's not. It was basically get your shit together or, this is it. Like I already lost my son. I've lost my ex-husband to drinking and, drugs. It's like, what else do I have to lose? At this point, I'm just going to take my kids and I'm just going to go. But I didn't. I don't know if I felt bad or I felt sorry for him because I couldn't imagine how I would react if it were me who was in his shoes. You know, if I felt like I was solely responsible for the death of my child, I can't say how I would react. So I don't know.
Right.
So I, yes, I was hard on him, but at the same time, I understood that he was grieving just as much, if not more, because he felt solely responsible for our son not being here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that I, I think I maybe let him get away with a little bit more than, you know, I normally would have because of the circumstances. So, he loses his job, you know, and he's freaking out. Like, what are we going to do? So I'm at work one day. My kids are at school. And my kids, I come home, and my son, I don't know, he's maybe 11, but he has a phone. You know, I make sure he has a phone, especially, you know, for this time. And he's like, Dad's not home. I'm like, well, where is he? I don't know. He's just not here. So I try to get a hold of my ex-husband, and he's not answering. And then at some point, his phone dies. And so I can't like call or anything. I have no idea where he's at, no idea what he's doing. Um, I tell my boss, okay, I have to leave because, you know, my kids are by themselves. I don't know where their dad is. Like, I need to go. So I go home. I finally get a hold of my husband. He calls me from the airport. He's like, I'm using somebody's cell phone. My phone died. Can you come and get me? And I'm like, well, what the hell are you doing at the airport?
Yeah.
He's like, well, I was just going to leave, but I changed my mind. Please come and get me. And of course, he's drunk and drugged out of his mind. So pick him up from the airport, comes home. He's acting, I don't know, different somehow. Like, I knew there was something different, but I didn't know, you know, and I had no idea what it was. You know, he seems a little bit more paranoid, whatever. So it turns out that where he actually went, okay, so he called an Uber to pick him up from our house. And the Uber took him to a grocery store right down the street from our house that had a bank in it. So he tells the Uber driver, wait outside. I'll be right back. I just have to go pick something up. He goes inside, hands the bank teller a note that says, I don't want to hurt you. Just put the money in the bag. He robs the bank inside the grocery store.
I'm sorry,
Of
I
all
shouldn't
places,
laugh.
like,
What?
yes. Yep.
He's Jesse James robbing a bank.
A bank, yes. In a grocery store. Yeah. Yep.
Oh my gosh. World's dumbest criminals, right? I think you
Yeah.
nailed it right there.
Yeah. So the Uber driver then takes him to the airport because I guess in his mind he was like, well, I'm just going to take off because, you know, I just fucked up. But he has a change of heart and he calls me and he's like, come and get me. And I didn't know any of this happened until much later. Like, I had no idea that he robbed a bank. You
Yeah,
know,
you
that
didn't know
was
that you were picking up a guy who just robbed a bank. You're
a
picking
criminal.
you're picking your husband
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Yeah. And I'm just glad that I found him. I'm glad that he hadn't taken off somewhere, you know. But no, what he was doing was actually robbing a bank. So he gets caught. What happens is, so he has a very distinct tattoo on his arm, and he was just showing everybody on camera, you know. And at this point, he's doing weekend jail for one of the DUIs that he got. Well, it's his last weekend, and he's thinking, yes, you know, I'm finally done with this shit. Well, it's time for them to release him, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not going anywhere. You're wanted for robbery. So they keep him. Like, he had no idea that they had known. They just thought that he was in jail like 7 days a week. They didn't know it was just weekend jail. Otherwise, they would have picked him up sooner. They were just waiting for him to finish that, and then they were going to keep him detained. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask a question. Did he get any money?
He did. He said he got about $4,000. And a funny thing, he hid it in our dryer. Like, he took off the back panel of our dryer and stuck it behind there. And what happened to it, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I have some ideas, but you know, yeah, he did that. All of
So
that for
he robs the bank
$4,000. Mm-hmm.
in an Uber,
In an Uber. Yep.
has $4,000, give or take, in cash in his pocket, goes to the airport,
Mm-hmm.
sobers up or whatever, and says, oh crap, what have I done? Calls his
Yeah.
wife, says, come and pick me up. For some reason,
Yep.
doesn't take an Uber back. I don't know why that. So
Yeah.
you go pick him up,
Hmm.
and somewhere down the road, find out because they arrest him in jail.
Yeah, because I'm supposed to go pick him up after his weekend jail, and he's not there. Like, he's not coming out. And so finally, I get tired of waiting. I go home, and later on, I get a phone call from a detective saying that they were holding him on charges of robbery, bank
Bank
robbery.
robbery. Who
Yep,
who robs a bank anymore? I mean,
I know. Yeah,
I didn't even know
yeah,
that was a thing anymore.
yeah. Apparently, it is.
Okay. Well, and again, I'm sorry for laughing, but what the hell? That's just dumb.
Yeah. Oh, it's so dumb. Yeah. It's like, man, I thought you were smarter than this, you know? And now, so anytime, like when I talk about him being smart, I always have to say he's book smart, but he's not common sense smart
Yeah.
because, you know, yeah,
Yeah, sounds like he's running on fumes in the common sense department. So,
absolutely.
Did you know you can get divorced without hiring an attorney? Let ourdivorce.com guide you through our 3-step process for a simple flat fee. Visit ourdivorce.com to learn more and get started today.
okay. All right. So he's arrested or
Mhm.
charged or whatever. So now he's really in trouble. This isn't a
Oh, yeah.
DUI. This
No, this
is,
is federal
yeah.
time. Huge deal. Yeah. His mom ends up getting him an attorney. He gets bonded out. He gets to come home. Um, of course, nothing has changed. Still, because now he has this added stress of, shit, I'm about to go to federal prison for a bank robbery,
Hmm.
so he's drinking for that and, to try to put a band aid on that. And yeah,
Is he working at all at this point?
no, I'm the only
So
one working.
you're supporting the family,
Yes. So I'm the only one
including his drinking.
supporting, including his drinking. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's got to piss you off.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. Yeah. So I come home one day and he is passed out, like from a mixture of drinking, and he took too many pills, and he's unconscious. Like I can't, he's breathing, but he's not awake, and I can't get him to wake up. So he has to go to the hospital. Like I get him up, and I'm able to drive him to the hospital. And they're like asking me like what's going on, and of course I have to tell them the whole thing. Okay, well, this is what happened. Our son just passed away. He's having a really hard time. I think he probably overdosed on something that he is prescribed. So they have to put him in a medically induced coma so he can go through withdrawal without having all of the withdrawal symptoms. Like they just let him do it while he's sleeping. So he was like that for a little while. And that was
A
really
little while
hard.
being a day or two, or like a week or two.
Oh,
What is
like a couple weeks.
really?
Yep. I think it was something like 10 days actually that he was in a
So they
medically
just put
induced
him out for
coma.
a couple of weeks. He wakes
Yep.
up theoretically not
Not
um,
going through withdrawal
without
or
the
not
withdrawals.
feeling any of that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah, it
I mean, I
was,
just think about like Bubbles on The Wire, who he had to go through it and like just sweat it out. And it's like, well, maybe that's a
right.
way that we should do this. I didn't know that that was even
Yeah.
an option.
Apparently it is. Yeah.
Huh?
I didn't know that either. So yeah, so at this time I don't blame him. Again, I can't imagine what he's going through. Um, so I'm going to the hospital every day after work, spending time there, even though he's not awake, and I'm still just there. I'm present. Um, and then they wake him up, and it's like nothing. I mean, he wakes up like normal. It's so crazy. All of that stuff had passed, and we get to go home, but there's still the issue of the bank robbery. We still have to go to court for that and everything, and and so he does. He goes to court. He ends up getting sentenced to 2 years. The judge takes it easy on him because of our circumstances at the time. With our son and everything, and So he only gets 2 years in a federal prison, and he gets to stay in Texas, and he's only about an hour and a half away from where we were living at the time. So I would be driving, once, twice a month, hour and a half to go see him in prison. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe 6 months until
Mm-hmm.
I just got tired of it. I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to be this wife that goes to see her husband in prison. I'm not going to bring my kids here. I'm not going to let them see their father like that. And I don't know what it was. Something just clicked. And that was when I had just had enough. And I just
Wow.
stopped going. And
I would have had enough years earlier. So again, patience of Job here with Kellie.
yeah, it was just all about trying to keep us all together. Nobody ever wants to go into a marriage hoping to get divorced. I didn't want that. I thought at this time, with us losing our son, with them losing their brother, I thought we all needed each other. And I was going to try everything I could to make sure that we were together. And it's like he was just fighting me on it every chance he could. He was doing something that was, you know, causing that to not happen. So
Holy crap.
finally, I just got tired of it.
So you made a decision, but what how did that decision come about? Or I mean, what did you do to make that decision actually become a reality?
Well, we knew when he was leaving, they had given him a date, like you have to self surrender on this day. And so I knew I was going to be on my own after that. Like it was just me and my kids, to do whatever we could. Um, but I don't know. I think it was just making the trips out there and seeing, for me, I didn't want that for myself. And so I think the visits became less and less. And then I finally just stopped and just told him, hey, this is not what I'm not going to do this. I don't want to do this. So
You
that's
called
how
him and
that
just
happened.
said, "I'm out."
Well, I didn't call him. He would call us,
Right,
when
collect.
he could. But yeah. But yeah, I just told him, look, this is not going to work. This is not the life I want for myself. This is not what I want for my kids. Like we were supposed to be a family. We were all supposed to be together, working through our issues together. And you went and fucked everything up. And, now I'm left on my own, to pay bills and to, rent and just whatever I could do to survive. I had to do
Yeah.
all of that on my own. Yeah. And
Wow.
that's I think what made me mad was the fact that he knew, in doing this, that yes, he's gonna go to prison, but I'm left here with everything, you know, how to survive. And I never lived on my own. Like I went from my mom's house directly to his house, so there was never a time where I had to experience things on my own or struggle or anything like that
Mhm.
until until that point. And I don't know, it just pissed me off because it's like, dude, you knew,
Mhm.
you were going to be leaving. And, here I am. At one point, I was working 3 jobs just to sustain our household, and then he would call me and say, well, can you send me money? No, I cannot send you money.
Yeah.
Like I'm barely making it as it is, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
so he's about a year into his federal time when the state of Arizona finally decides to press charges on him. How do I don't well, I don't remember what they called it, but they basically picked him up from the federal prison and took him back to Arizona, and they were trying to charge him with second-degree murder at first for the death
Of
of
your
our son.
son? Oh my
Yes.
gosh, really?
Yes. So in the state of Arizona, even if it's an accident,
It's
it's
negligent
still
homicide or
negligence,
whatever.
right? So they were going to charge him with something, and I'm not really sure what came back on the toxicology report for him. I don't know what his blood alcohol was at the time because they did take it, but maybe there's something there that I don't know about. Maybe because I've asked him multiple times, were you drinking? What were you doing? And he said, no, I was just tired. I just fell asleep. But I mean, apparently the state of Arizona thinks otherwise. So
So all right. So while he's in federal prison, Arizona extradites or whatever gets him out to Arizona. When was this? When did that happen?
I don't remember the year. 2019 maybe. I really can't remember.
Okay,
It was
but not
not. I
too
mean, it was
long
just a
ago.
year after. No, nope, not that long ago.
So was he charged by Arizona then?
He was. They actually charged him manslaughter, and he got 8 years.
Oh my gosh. So he
Yeah.
he finished his time in federal and then went over there, or what?
They didn't even let him finish his time. They just picked him up, and I guess it'll be time served because he went, just from one prison right to the other.
And he's still in
So,
prison.
and he's still in prison. Yep. So he'll be in prison. He won't get to see my son graduate high school. He won't, get to see my daughter turn 16. He still has another 4 years, 4 or 5 years,
Wow.
4 years. Hmm. Yeah.
So I'm assuming at that point you filed for a divorce.
So I actually have not filed for a divorce yet.
Oh, you're still
He's
married to him.
We're technically still married. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
I don't know how to, like, I've looked into it and things like that, but with him being in prison, I can imagine it makes things just a little bit harder. And I figure I'll just wait till he gets out and then we can just do things, amicably while he's here. Maybe if there are things that he wants to ask for, like certain weekends or certain days with the kids, I want him to be able to do that. Like I said, he's an amazing father. He just made really, really poor choices. So,
Wow.
and I don't, yeah.
Well, let me ask about your kids then, because they can't be happy with him. Do they want to be with him?
My daughter, she's she's definitely daddy's girl. He could do no wrong in her eyes. And I'll tell you, they don't know that he robbed a bank.
Oh,
They
really?
they don't know any. Yeah, there's actually a lot of my family that don't know. I've managed to keep it a secret somehow, from a lot of my family, just for the simple fact that I am ashamed. I'm embarrassed for him, and I'm ashamed that he even did that. And I don't know how they're gonna look at me if I tell them, that this is what he did. So I chose not to tell a lot of people.
Well, that's over.
Yeah. Yep.
May,
Yeah.
a little suggestion: you might want to let them know before this episode comes out.
You're
just
right.
just
Yeah. I
saying.
mean, that was a few years ago. Whenever I was still trying to keep us all together, whatever I could do to just keep things calm. And so I didn't want to bring my family into it, or, anybody that I didn't have to.
Hmm.
So, yeah, only a handful of people actually know that he robbed a bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
That's if I were to try and list all the things that I've heard today that are crazy. I, I mean, I've got a whole page of notes here, but wow.
Yeah.
Um. Well, okay. So he's been in prison 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's got another 3 or 4 or 5 left. You're just
Yeah.
playing it by ear. Um,
Yep.
do you talk to him on a regular basis or from time to time?
From time to time, he calls about once a week to speak to the kids. And he calls my phone, and I usually just pass it off to them. Really, I don't feel like there's anything to be said between us. You know, um, our marriage is over. Obviously, I'm living with somebody else, and he knows about him, and you know, so really, unless it's about the kids, I don't speak to him,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Personally, I think that's the best way to have an ex spouse. Uh,
Hmm.
there's there's one thing about being friendly, but there's a completely different thing about being friends, and
Right.
I, you don't have to be friends uh, to
Exactly.
have a
Yeah.
decent co-parenting relationship.
Right.
Well, okay. Wow, this has been really a crazy story. Again, the divorce part of it, obviously not crazy because it hasn't even happened.
It hasn't
But
happened yet. Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah, okay. Um,
It's gonna
well,
happen though. I'm just just
yeah,
waiting. But yes, it is definitely on my list of things to do. So
yeah, yeah. You might there might be a few people that reach out to you offering some legal services. Um, I'm not an attorney, so I can't say, but my understanding is that if one party is in prison,
mhm.
divorces are pretty darn easy.
Oh,
Um, that's I've been told that. In fact, one of our guests, I'm trying to remember who it was. One of our guests um, had to do that, and I can't remember now. Anyway, something to think about.
oh yeah.
All right. Okay, so you're in essence single. But you're living with a guy, so you're not in essence single anymore. Um,
Right.
does he have kids of his own? Or are you kind of stepmom, or just your kids in the house?
No, just mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, last question for you. And this is the one that I love. You've been through more shit than I think anybody on this show so far. Um,
Yeah.
not that it's a contest, but
Of course
you
not.
win the prize for the laundry list of shit.
Of stuff. Yeah.
You've learned a lot. You've grown a lot. You've been forced to do a lot of things
Hmm.
to grow up and figure yourself out. So you've got some advice that you'd like to share. What is your greatest piece of advice for people?
My greatest piece of advice that I know better, that I wish I would have done for myself when I was going through all of this, was to not ignore those red flags. Don't push them to the side, or don't think that, you know, you can't leave because you can't start over, or you can't leave because you don't have anywhere to go, because that's really not the case. I wish I would have never just dismissed or brushed off these things that I saw, because who knows what would have been different.
Right.
My son could still be here. We could still be that family, but we're not anymore because I chose to look the other way with a lot of things that I shouldn't have. And I really regret that.
Yeah. Wow. Kelly, like I've said before already, words can't describe I wish there was more that I could do than say I'm so sorry. But thank you for sharing. Thank you for being strong and overcoming.
Oh, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Well,
So I learned very quickly, and I'm doing very well. My kids are well. They're healthy. They don't, want for anything. I'm in a good place right now. And, it's unfortunate how I got to be here, but I'm here. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And good for you just for sticking it out. So
Yes.
congratulations. And thanks again
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Ugh, my heart just hurts for her. But when someone who's lost a child offers advice, I hope we all listen. Do not ignore red flags. Because as she said, you never know what life may have been if she hadn't swept them under the rug. I'd love to help Kelly out. So if you're a divorce attorney in Texas and would be willing to help Kelly, please reach out to me. Let's talk. That's all for this week, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hug your kids a little tighter today. If you like today's show, please show it by giving us 5 stars on whatever app you're using right now. It really helps. I hope you have an amazing week. Bye.
It's a great day, I'm feeling good. Oh, the possibilities of what I could.
Divorce doesn't have to be complicated. Our Divorce.com's 3-step procedure provides a simple and affordable process that you can follow at your own pace. Save thousands by visiting ourdivorce.com today.